Now going back to the audits, what do you do if you get audited? First of all, well, this will date me. For those of you 35 and older, take a lewd. Right? Calm. No. Be the ball. It's all good. It's only about money. It may not be a lot of money. In this country, we have a fear of the IRS, and they promote it. You notice around April 15th, they did it this year again. They announce all the people they're nailing for tax avoidance. There's a reason for that. The chances of you being a tax criminal are less than the chances of you being eaten by a shark, statistically. Unless what? I mean, how do you become a tax criminal? Lie. Don't report income that exists, or manufacture. I don't mean get aggressive. I mean manufacture from whole cloth deductions. If you don't fall into one of those two categories, you didn't lie to the IRS, don't worry about it. It's just about money. If we can beat them on the few items they tend to look at, then the audit will probably go away. I win my audits typically. By the way, I do audits across the country, including appeals and tax court representation. I win most of my audits. In the last 5 years, I've only had one client pay money to the IRS. Now, that was a little bit of luck, because if you have a lousy case, I'm going to tell you. I'm this crazy thing known as an honest lawyer. What a lot of lawyers will do, if you have a bad tax case because of your fear, they'll say, we'll fight the IRS, knowing they're going to lose, but they get to bill you. If I think you're going to lose, I will tell you. And you don't want to necessarily hear that, and it upsets you, and I'll tell you why I think you're going to lose. And I'll talk you into paying me less to settle.
Does the getting the W-9 apply to both full-time real estate investors and passive income investors?
Does the W-9 apply to real estate investors? And that's a generic restatement of the question. Yes. Rentals, it has to be a trader business, and the IRS considers for these purposes most rental activity to be a trader business. So if you've got rentals and there are contractors involved, there should also be 1099s involved. And by the way, here's something I would not do. Tim, I know you don't want to pay taxes and I want to keep you as a contractor, so I'm going to pay you $599, I'm going to pay your spouse $599, I'm going to pay your kid $599, etc. What's the problem with that? It's fraud. And you're a co-conspirator. Don't do that. So back to the audit. What do you do if you get audited? Gather up the records. Don't procrastinate. Don't put it off. Get representation. Don't appear in front of those people. And hit the records hard enough that you can make the initial issue go away. What happens if you get a bad auditor? And they do exist. What do I look for when I profile? I'm sorry?
Cat women.
Yeah. Well, I don't look for that. It's just sort of a surprise when it occurs, the cat women. The first thing I look at is how old are they? Before the late 90s, the IRS was different. There were a bunch of reforms put in by a Republican Congress that changed the IRS and gave taxpayers a lot more rights and the IRS less power. The people who were around before those reforms, some of them did not get the memo. Some of them have a different attitude. They still remember the old days and they kind of operate on that. Most of them got the memo, but we do get a few. If the agent belongs to a demographic group that is overall very liberal, it catches my attention. Why? Because I've seen agents come into a room where they consider you to be the rich fat cat, and they're a social justice warrior, and the law means nothing and their opinion means everything. And I had one, we went to tax court on an issue known as taking a property subject to. We went all the way to tax court, we were in front of the judge, and the IRS decided they didn't want to fight and settled for zero, meaning my client owed zero. My client got audited for the very same thing the next year. He even got the same letter with the dates and the numbers different. We presented to the IRS auditor, who was from a demographic group that goes heavily left and was old enough to have remembered the old IRS. She's the worst one I ever dealt with. It's not real typical. She's the worst one. I said, look, we went to tax court. They didn't want to fight. Here's the name of the IRS lawyer. Here's the name of the appeals agent. Here's the name of the research specialist who did all this and decided they didn't want to take this case. Would you please call them? No. What you're doing is illegal. Excuse me? What you're doing is illegal. Well, okay, call the police. I'll wait. No, because the first thing you do when someone threatens like that, you have to immediately call them out. Immediately. Right? The military teaches there are 3 ways to deal with an ambush. You could stand there and get shot in the face. You can turn around and run and get shot in the back, or you countercharge and wipe them out. You hose it down, expend a ton of ammo, make a big mess, and make sure you're not the dead guy. That's how you deal with someone aggressive like that. You go straight at them. I sent a letter. What I told the client was this. I said, look, she's irrational. She's decided you're a bad person, and she's going to make trouble no matter what. Now, I can have a fight with her. I can put 40 hours into this, and we'll fight. It's not going to change the result at all. It's just not going to happen. So here's what I suggest. Let us end the audit as fast as possible, and I'm going to provide a catalyst for that. She's going to put, just so you know, don't be alarmed, she's going to put on the notice of deficiency, she's going to put a huge number. Don't worry about it, it won't stand. Just like we won in tax court before, I don't think we're going to have to go that far this time. That number won't stand, so don't panic. I'm trying to save you money. Dealing with this woman is a waste of time. And so I wrote her a letter. This is how we ended the audit. I wrote a letter that said, and I CC'd her supervisor, the letter said, it is not your job to judge. We don't care about your opinion. Your job is to decide if my client A, reported all of his income, and B, his deductions are legitimate. For example, and I put this in writing, if my client were a crack dealer, you should call the cops if you feel the need, but we're not really interested in your opinion on crack dealers. The question you need to answer is, did the crack dealer report all the little green pieces of paper he got in exchange for dime bags, A? And B, are guns, bling, and bad music tax-deductible expenses for a crack dealer? The audit ended very quickly. She put a huge number on there. We went to appeals and immediately got it settled. And that was the end of it. And I did send her a letter going, sometimes that happens, you deal with it. You do have a lot more rights when dealing with the IRS than when you're dealing with any other bureaucracy. There's something called the tax court. They're easy to get to, they're knowledgeable, and they don't tolerate nonsense. I wish we had that for all the bureaucratic agencies, an EPA court, a Department of Labor court, etc. If an audit doesn't go well and you have not hired me, naughty, naughty, don't do what's called a protest. So write down protest bad. The protest gets you to the appeals agents, and I'm going to talk about a better way to get an appeals agent. Appeals agents are better educated than the lower level auditors. They have a lot of power to settle. They are supposed to settle. The government cannot fight every case. They don't have nearly enough lawyers. You know, the IRS will thump its chest. We got 5,000 lawyers. There are 300 million of us. They just don't have the time to take everything. So if we can inject any legitimate, we never lie, never lie to the IRS. Then you convert a money issue into an orange jumpsuit issue. Don't ever lie. If you don't know the answer to something for sure, you say, I'm going to find out. I'm not going to answer now because my memory is not so good on this, but I will find out, and then you follow up. You never lie, ever. You don't see anything that could be a lie. If you just really don't remember, they will convert faulty memory into a lie. Google Scooter Libby, Bush's chief of staff. His bad memory got him a felony conviction. Now that was political, but it does happen to normal people. Lesson 2, and then I'll come back to appeals. Don't ever answer a question that was not asked. First of all, you probably shouldn't have contact with the IRS. It's extraordinarily rare that my clients do. We don't normally permit it. But this is not the confessional. This is not, you think carefully what was asked, and you answer only that question, and you answer it literally. Now back to appeals agents. We like them. We like them because they settle, because they have more knowledge, they're more reasonable, they don't want to go to court. If there's a way to settle, they're going to. If there's a way to settle, they're going to. There are 2 ways to get an appeals agent. The first one is you write what's called a protest letter. It takes about a year, and you get terrible results. Why? They're not motivated. They don't have a time deadline. They don't have pressure to settle. We've noticed the results that when we go to the appeals agents through a protest don't work. So we skip the protest. We go straight to tax court. When we go to tax court, an appeals agent from the very same office is going to contact you. They now have a deadline. The tax court date is usually 9 to 12 months away. A lot of the time, the settlement doesn't occur until right before the trial. Very common. The closer to the trial you get, two things happen, one good and one bad. The closer to the trial you get, the more nervous you get, the longer your stress level lasts, but the better the settlement. The closer we get to the trial, the better the settlement, because we're running the clock on them. When the IRS says, would you like to extend the case, the answer is no, because they will try to buy time so they can go fishing. Don't give them that time. Now, I don't like to create an adversarial relationship with IRS lawyers unless I have to. I like most of the IRS lawyers I've dealt with. Most of them are quality people. I don't like their job. That's why I don't do it. I do blue lightsaber, not red lightsaber. They're dark side. But they're nice dark side. They actually have intelligence and integrity. They really do. So I don't like to alienate them. So how do I do it with a client when the IRS says, would you like to extend? Tim, would you like to extend this case? I told the nice man at the IRS I would ask my client if he wants to extend the case. Would you like to extend the case, Tim? No. Shockingly, he said no. And usually it's true. Tim, does this make you nervous? Wouldn't you just like to get this done with?
Yes.
And that's what we tell the lawyer. Now they know what I'm saying. It's the classic, you went to the car salesman, you go to the manager. That's how you do it. You get better settlements with those appeals agents through the tax court. Plus, it cuts a year off the process. Because if you go and get a protest, it adds a year to the process before you go to tax court. And then what happens when you go to tax court? You get another appeals agent. Well, why not just cut it short? They are very busy. How do you get a settlement from the IRS? A, run the clock. Well, B, be correct. Keep good records and be correct. B, run the clock. I talk to the client. I have to judge the client and how much risk tolerance they have. So I might give a different answer. Same exact situation, a different answer for her than I do for him based on how much risk and stress can they tolerate. I will contact the IRS appeals office ideally once, and I will verify it both through a phone call and a fax so I can prove in court I did both, and then I wait for them to contact me. I don't follow up and I don't push. Why? It's to my benefit to run the clock, and if they're the ones running it, I have no moral culpability. So I generally will not pester them and try to get a hold of them unless what? The client's a nervous Nelly and pushes it. And I'll tell them ahead of time, I don't recommend this, I just want this over. Okay, be careful what you ask for. Understand how bureaucrats think. Bureaucrats are not rewarded for performance. They're not rewarded for doing something well or correct. They're rewarded for not screwing up. As long as you don't screw up, you advance on a certain schedule. There's politics involved, but you don't screw up. You either don't screw up or you have someone to blame it on. So how do we think about it from the perspective of an IRS lawyer. Are they rewarded for winning a case? Is it a penalty to lose? So if I can inject some gray, if I can make them uncertain about their case, if it's not a slam dunk, and by the way, if it's a slam dunk, that's where I tell you, don't pay me to research this or go to trial. That's a bad use of your money. If it's a slam dunk for the IRS, I tell you, you're going to lose. Let's get it done ahead of time without a lot of hours. And if we do it ahead of time, oftentimes they'll drop penalties. They'll compromise to avoid the trial. So even if you have a bad case, it's worth going to appeals to get them to drop the penalties. And they will do it very often. But my job is to insert enough gray that the IRS lawyer does not want to go to court. They would rather settle. It's easier, it's quicker, and they don't have any personal risk. So that's what we're seeing in audits.